Welcome back to the Moving to Japan podcast. I'm your host, Ziv Nakajima again, and if you're new here, this podcast is dedicated to all of you out there who are either in the process of or thinking about relocating to the land of the rising sun, as well as for those among you who are in the business of relocating others to Japan, so HR managers, global mobility managers, business owners whose business or part of their business is to help employees and their families move to, work, and settle here. Whether you're coming here or relocating employees here for a short period of time or as far as the eye can see, this podcast is for you. We're going to be talking about everything from the move itself to daily life, culture and language barriers and nuances, the logistics of it all, and much, much more. Pick the brain of various industry leaders and experts in their field, all around this topic of moving to Japan. And today's episode is a conversation with an awesome young man, Aman Agarwal, a dual resident of India, the USA, and now a triple resident of Japan as well. I've known Aman for a number of years, mainly due to our mutual interest in business and entrepreneurship. He's a very bright young man who's always curious, inquisitive, trying new things. So just the kind of profile of folks who don't shy away from new challenges, which, as it turned out in his case, has also been a huge help in his journey to relocate to Japan, which he's going to be doing in a few months' time. We talk about his personal journey, his new research and business venture, his previous business, which he's now closed down, and of course about his move to Japan itself, the J-Find visa, which is one of the two new visas recently announced by the government here, and much, much more. And his is exactly the type of attitude needed to succeed in a move to any new country, let alone Japan, where language and cultural gaps tend to be a lot wider compared to many other places around the world. As we've discussed in our previous conversation with Jason Ball, owner and admin of the Business in Japan community, super informative interview that we published recently. I will link to that episode in the show notes as well. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Aman Agarwal. Enjoy the chat, and I'll see you again on the other side.
Yes, so it has been a while. We spoke on the phone a few times, but I haven't seen your beautiful face for quite some time, except I kind of see your face every day on LinkedIn and stuff, but not live.
Yeah.
So, dude, before we get into everything we're going to be talking about, nobody here knows me unless they've been listening to your podcast. So hit us with the comic book number one, the origin story. Who the hell are you?
Yeah, sounds good. So my name is Aman, and I'm a startup founder, currently based in India, and I've been working remotely for a while. And I am moving myself and my startup work, a bit of it at least, to Japan. For at least 6 months to a year, possibly. And my startup is basically like a social network for scientists and engineers. And we're a distributed team. We raised a little bit of funding this year, and we're off to the races. Yeah.
When you say 6 months to a year, we'll get into that in a minute, but that's due to visa restrictions, or are you actually planning to go somewhere else after that?
So that's mainly due to visa restrictions. I have a visa for a year, but it's a single entry visa. So I might want to visit, come back home to India for, some work about May end to June-ish. And I am not sure how or if I'll be able to get a re-entry. I have no idea why they gave me a single entry visa for a year, but
something to do with it, I think.
Sorry?
I think because maybe you're from India, there's a few countries where they just don't care about that, but most of the countries they're a bit cautious, I think. But yeah, hang on, we'll get into that in a minute. But that's not your first business, isn't it? You've been at it for a while now.
This is my second business. My first business was a tech education company. And that one, I kind of wrapped up the operations, most of it. And that one was also an international company. It was based in Estonia. And I managed it remotely from wherever I wanted to be. So This is my second company. And this one is based in the USA.
Okay. Well, when you say based in, you mean that's where you set up the corporate structure?
That's where, that is, it's set up in the USA as a Delaware corporation. And I can manage it from wherever I want to be.
What is it about Delaware? I've seen a few of our customers who have companies in the US that have set up in Delaware, even though they don't live there. Is that is that state easier on legislation or what?
Yeah, it's considered the most popular destination in the USA for incorporating a company. And the reason why, I think it's due to tax reasons and also how easy it is to get registered there. I think it's a combination of the two. But pretty much all companies that, for example, even in tech startups, most of them are set up in Delaware as a Delaware C Corp or something like that.
Okay. Oh, so then just before we get into the current business and the visa, I know I keep postponing that, but we'll get there.
Sure.
What was it that made you decide to switch over from company number one to company number two to wrap up operations? What happened there?
So, to be honest, what happened was that it wasn't doing as well as I thought it would due to some strategic business mistakes that I made early on. And it also was a very unscalable business. That it was a services company, and I had to kind of like work myself half to death to just keep it running, right?
So you were
And yeah, I was the company in a way, which is not, even though I hired people, it was not the best business to be in, and I was looking for something which is much more scalable, um, and also more exciting. I mean, services businesses can be exciting, depending on what kind of services you offer and what kind of work you want to do. Like it varies from person to person. But I've realized from that business that the part of the journey that I enjoyed the most was to make new things, right? To build things and make new things that instantly are available to thousands, millions of people. For example, I published a book, which was really rewarding endeavor just to publish the book, and the response was great, and it reached people that I never would have imagined it would reach, right? So I realized that part of the joy of entrepreneurship for me is to make something that's available to all kinds of strangers that kind of like are out there in the world. And that's why I'm kind of more in a B2C, you know startup space right now. And that's kind of more exciting to me, building new things, building a product. And of course, like, there are people who excel in services, who excel in that B2B sales aspect and everything. And I've realized that that's not my skill set, at
you're a
least right now.
builder.
Yeah. It's a work in progress. I'm not bad, but it's not what makes me want to get up in the morning and say, I'm going to be doing sales, or I'm going to be doing, like a marketing campaign for enterprises or something like that.
What's the product? What's the company?
Yeah, so this company is a startup. It's a social network. You could say like a LinkedIn that's specially made for scientists, engineers, advanced researchers, those types of people. It's purely a software company, in many ways. And right now, it's a team of me and one part-time senior developer who's based in Europe. Um, and we are just on track to you know start growing. And yeah, what else? I mean, it's that journey.
When you say social media for scientists,
Social network. Yep.
sorry, social network for scientists,
Yep.
that the type of people it's going to attract, or is that the way it's built? Does it have features that would cater specifically to scientists? What's the scientist angle there?
Yeah, exactly. So typically, what is missing in terms of the internet landscape for scientists, you have LinkedIn, you have Twitter, you have all these places where, if you're a scientist, you can go and talk science if you want to. But what's missing is a place where you can go to every day or week to get access to the hottest papers, the hottest research articles in your field, to network with other scholars about those papers and about the science, and collaborate, build your reputation as a scientist, as a scholar in your field, and also get opportunities for making money and for advancing in your career. So there are like there's already LinkedIn, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, and scientists use kind of like pockets of Twitter and pockets of LinkedIn for their stuff, but these places don't really serve. They're more for a mass audience, and they don't serve the needs of scientists and engineers that well. So it's kind of a niche social network which caters to some of the pain points that they have that they can't really solve elsewhere. Yep.
Okay, so
It's kind of like,
go
yeah,
ahead.
to put it very simply, it's kind of like you have conferences for scientists, right? So scientists are always traveling to conferences around the world, right? And what they do at these conferences is they share the latest research and they have discussions and they network with each other, like, oh, what are you working on? What am I working on? Let's collaborate on this and that. And there's people who show up to either help commercialize their research, right? So this is what happens in conferences. And the purpose of Denslays is to also bring a lot of that onto a digital platform which hasn't existed yet for some reason. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And then I'm assuming when you say it's geared toward scientists, it's probably going to have, if it's going to be discussing bodies of work, it's probably going to have features like annotations and footnotes and asking for
Exactly.
views and that sort of thing. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yep,
Okay,
exactly.
so
That is the core of the product. Yep.
So how did Japan enter the picture for you?
Yeah, so Japan is more of a personal decision. So it's less to do with the startup, although the one angle that I kind of like willed into existence, because I knew I wanted to go to Japan. So I was like, how can I make this valuable for my company as well, not just for me personally, right? So I got myself accepted into an AI accelerator incubator of sorts in Tokyo, and which is kind of like run by an investment firm in Japan called Deep Core.
Yep.
I'm not sure if they're famous in Japan or if people are familiar with them. So Deep Core, they have a wing that invests in AI startups. I got myself accepted there, and because by nature of the community I'm going after, a lot of people don't speak English. There's a lot of hidden science and hidden like scientists in Japan, China, Russia, and these places who have trouble communicating their science with the rest of the world. I wanted to ideally find some teammates, ideally a co-founder, who was Japanese or Chinese, right? And who could help bring that perspective, so we could build a truly global platform, right, for scholars everywhere, not just in English-speaking places. Because I'm very Americanized in that regard in terms of my education and my professional experience. But I do know that there's a lot of, so for example, China is the number one publisher of scientific articles. They publish like 2 to 2.5 million articles per year, which is way more than any other country. And most of the science does not even get discussed or talked about anywhere else in the world, right? Same for a lot of English language research, which doesn't transfer to Japan or China. So that being in that environment, being around the University of Tokyo, being in that accelerator, which is predominantly full of Japanese entrepreneurs who are also working on AI stuff. So I thought that would be valuable for the business as well. Yeah.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so Japan is basically a personal interest. You kind of found an angle there, and then what did you do next? Did you start the journey with your first company to move to Japan, or was that just something that came up with the second one?
Yeah, so I read about this new visa that came out in Japan called the J-Find visa. It's called a future creation individual visa, right? And to my surprise, it was I finished a master's degree at Cornell in the USA in 2019, and the visa basically gives is if you graduate from one of the 50 top universities or so that like recognized by the Japanese government in the last 5 years, then you can apply for this visa. You can qualify for this visa to just come and explore, work, not work, right? Build your own business, build a new company.
Graduated from one of these institutions, right?
Yes. from these. So they have a list of 50 institutions, and if you graduated within the last 5 years, you can apply for the visa. So me graduating in 2019 I was right. This was like my last chance in a way.
Yep.
And so I thought, why not apply? And it's also it's not a very restrictive visa in terms of what you can do in Japan, right? Once you get here, as long as you don't enter into the adult industry or entertainment industry, something like that, which I guess most people don't want to if they're on, if they're on a visa like this.
Yeah.
Legally, you can kind of like just not work and just explore and do market research, and that's a perfectly valid reason to be in Japan, right? So that was also attractive to me. Like, I don't have to be boxed into what kind of work I can do. I can keep building my business, which I already have, right? Which is not a Japanese company. And if I wanted to, I could look for a job, which I don't, need to, but I could do that. If I could also just explore starting a Japanese company and make it like a market research trip for a year or 2 years. It's really nice, flexible visa. So, and I just got lucky that it was available when I looked for it. Yeah.
Right. And the period of time you mentioned initially that you got up to a year. So other people
Yes.
get different periods?
I asked for a year and I got a year. I think it's about you can stay for 1 year in general, and then you can get it extended for another year. Is from the way I understand. Maybe there's people who get a visa for 2 years straight, but I think 2 years is the limit, and after that you have to, figure out what you want to do and then switch to that visa specifically.
Right. So what do you have sort of a game plan on what you'll be doing at the end of that year?
So from me, I want to keep building this company, right? And what might change, is I might want to set up a Japanese entity and have an office there with some Japanese employees. I think that's the like best case scenario, and it's not a best case scenario, but that's the most likely scenario for what would make me stay in Japan and keep building my business there, right? So if there is a game plan, that would be the most likely scenario for me to set up a Japanese company. And another thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that I also have some long-term interest in in Japan as an entrepreneur, which is kind of like part of how I came into meeting with you in the first place, right? Because I was kind of networking with expats who were influential in the Japanese entrepreneurship landscape. So I do have some long-term interest in Japan, in the multimedia space. So I do want to explore some of those and maybe like look into acquiring a business as well, which is kind of like a separate discussion, I know, like, but one that we've kind of like touched on that, you and me, Ziv, in the past, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these different things that I also want to explore while focusing on building my business in Japan, at least for 6 months to a year. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, first you said you got a little bit of funding. Now you're saying you're going to be acquiring companies. So let's break that down for a minute. What are we doing financially with the company, and what's the plan?
So the acquisitions won't be for the startup. They would be more like a personal kind of like hands-off kind of an acquisition, if at all.
Like what we do at Nippon Bridge, maybe invest in an existing business or a franchise business or something of that sort, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it wouldn't be like buying a business and then making that my business. That's very unlikely for me, at least right now. I mean, I have taken money from investors for a startup, and that's what I'm going to build, right? But like I said, it's like if I stretch it out long, like I do want to get into, because I like studying different businesses and thinking of how to improve a business or looking into different markets, right? That's how we met on the Eccentric CEO podcast, right?
Yep.
That was the theme of the show. And so Japan being a place where there's a lot of elderly business owners who ideally would want to offload their business or to put it crudely, give it away at more of a discount, like as long as the business has has a future, something like that. Like I think it's a very, from a demographic standpoint, I think it's a very attractive place to look for businesses and look for motivated sellers of small companies, which could be strategically useful, and have a have like some hidden opportunities which maybe other people are not looking at. So that was uh,
That's the
part
long
of the
term.
reason. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the long term
So,
thing.
so you obviously I've follow you again on LinkedIn mostly, and I see that you've been struggling, but also succeeding to somewhat, to some degree with studying Japanese, which is obviously one of
Uh-huh.
the main things that people need here. What have you experienced in your visits or conversations that might be also challenging down the track? Like, what are you anticipating that you'll be running into once you try to start a new life here?
Yeah, so I just had a broken Japanese phone conversation today for the first time, and that taught me how much I know, but also how little I know in Japanese, right? Because there's like, you don't know two words in a sentence, and then like the whole thing goes off, kind of like goes off your head, right?
Tell me about it.
So that's kind of the main challenge. But I've also realized that in terms of moving to Japan, um, a lot of the conversations you'll have are repetitive in terms of the, for example, apartment, in terms of the few places where you'll be a lot, very often. And so part of my preparation over the next month or two for moving to Japan is to focus my vocabulary study on those few repetitive conversations that I know I'm going to have all the time,
That's
right?
very smart, actually.
Um, yeah, because I do have a very strong base in Japanese in terms of how the language works and the sentence pattern, so I can understand what they're saying or what they're trying to say, except what they're talking about, which is like kind of the yeah. So,
Well, we're
but
talking
in terms of,
now,
yeah,
but what's the point?
yeah, exactly.
I get that
Yeah,
a lot. Okay,
yeah.
and how about just like day-to-day logistics, like finding a place to live,
Hmm.
opening a bank account, signing up for utilities, that sort of thing? Have you sort of considered how you're going to be running that one?
That's part of the motivation for today's conversation as well. I've been looking into it. I've been looking into finding a place to rent, and I realized very quickly that moving into a new apartment is off, kind of like off the plans. It's too complicated. It's too expensive. So I think a share house, at least for me, I'm kind of social enough, and I like being around other people.
Yep.
So for me, moving into a share house with a company that's experienced in working with foreigners, where they don't have a lot of the initial upfront costs, right?
It's also
Um,
one of the best places to actually pick up at least casual spoken Japanese because
yep,
I don't know if a large percent, but definitely a half or slightly less than the people who go to these share houses are Japanese who want the exposure to
yep,
foreigners, right?
yep, exactly. I think 50 to 60% of share house occupants are Japanese from the ones I've seen so far, which is
Mm.
actually a good sign. Except, I mean, I hope they're willing to talk. But
That's why
apart from that, yeah,
most of them. I mean, some of them have spent a few years overseas, and now that they've come back, they maybe find it difficult to get a guarantor, or they don't have a salary to show to rent a place. But
yep,
a lot of them are definitely there because they want to be there. Because again, they've lived overseas and they want to keep the immersion going when they go back to Japan.
mhm, yep, and that's part of also what's attractive to me. And also, you already have a lot of the appliances, right? You don't have to kind of like furnish a new apartment in a new country in a new language all at once, while dealing with the guarantor company and this and that. So I'm looking at shared houses, but I'm really not very aware about the legal stuff that I have to do in terms of insurance, taxes. How do I make? So I pay myself a salary from my American company,
Mm.
and I pay taxes in India right now, right? And I am not quite sure how like I'm gonna pay myself and basically get money in my hands in Japan legally without paying double the taxes or something like that, right? So that's also a consideration for me.
Not have a tax treaty in place? I don't think double taxation is a concern. I'll quickly look that up. Keep talking.
Yeah. So that's I mean they probably do, especially with India.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure like how what's the best way to move money, whether I should pay myself directly from the US to Japan or to India and then just spend the Indian money with the conversion rate. Like I'm not quite sure about how that whole side of things is going to work. I'm still researching that, and also opening whether do I need a bank account in Japan? Um, if so, then how to open it? Um, and then there's the thing about you have to get a residence card,
Yeah.
right? And
Obviously,
stuff like that. Yeah.
we've been communicating a lot about entrepreneurship and business and so forth, but obviously you haven't dug deeply into our companies because this is exactly what we do here, man.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of this has already been done, so we can take that up. Actually, we can take some of it up now if you want, but there are solutions for all of that. Generally speaking, you do want a Japanese bank account because Western Union is not a big thing in Japan. It's
Okay.
very difficult to transfer money unless it's going into a Japanese bank account.
Mhm.
So you definitely want to try and open a bank account. Once you get your residency, the easiest banks to do that with are the Post Bank, if you want to go brick and mortar.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Post bank. Okay.
the post office bank, and
Okay.
all of the online banks will let you do that. Some of them will have restrictions that you can only do that after about 6 months. So you might want to start with a bit of cash coming in. But a lot of them will actually, once you've got residency, will let you open an account, and then it's a matter of getting yourself. Even before that, actually, if you sign up with Wise, I think you can use a Wise debit card, right, which will let you access your funds. And then address registration. Yeah. So once you arrive, where are you arriving to, by the way? Which is going to be your first city?
Tokyo. That's going to be the only city. Yep.
Okay, so Tokyo is the biggest airport. Obviously, you're going to get a residency card at the airport.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you're going to go to the local ward office to register your address within 2 weeks once you know where you're staying, or even immediately if you already know where you're staying. And then once you've registered at the ward office, the other things that you'll be able to do there is to sign up for pension services, national insurance services, and get your residency certificate, which is what you're then going to use for all sorts of other things. So opening a bank account, if you do end up getting a place, you'll use that to sign a lease, to apply for local mobile phone account, utilities, if you end up having a place. But the residency card and the residency certificate would be your first steps.
Sounds good. Yeah. So there's a residency card, and then there's another registration at the local ward office.
The residency card will not have an address on it at the start, and then you're obliged within 2 weeks to go to the whichever ward office you happen to be moving into. So if it's a share house, that's fine. And then you go to that local ward office to update your address on the residence card and get your address certificate. And that address certificate, like the importance of that cannot be overstated. That is one of the most important documents you want because that shows that you're actually a resident.
Okay.
Yep,
makes sense.
Oh, that's exciting stuff, man. So just to give you some value out of this podcast, what sort of people would you like to connect with, liaise with once you get to Japan? What kind of people are you looking for, and what sort of let's say business sectors are most interesting for you? Obviously scientists, but who would you like to meet once you've landed here?
Yeah, so I definitely, so for example, there's this company which does mainly acquisitions. They have that grow through acquisition kind of strategy, and they have an American CEO who speaks Japanese. So I was thinking like maybe I'll just email him and then show up at his office a couple of times, like say, hey, can I meet this guy, and like maybe ask, maybe have a chat and maybe ask him to mentor me. So I would say people who do acquisitions regularly in Japan, right?
Yeah. This is because you want somebody to buy your company, or is this for the second chapter that you mentioned of you acquiring gold?
Yeah, this is for like mentorship and guidance, and like just having somebody who's doing something that I want to do in the future, and building my network. Again, like I said, with Japan, the intention is to kind of like sow some seeds for any future opportunities that I might want to exploit, right? So in the beginning, it's not like I have some urgent needs. In terms of the kind of people, of course, I want to look for a co-founder. Ideally, I'll probably want to hire some interns or maybe even employees from the University of Tokyo and the standard universities, which I think I've heard they're really good and really produce like top caliber talent. So there's that. And apart from that, like-minded individuals, I've heard that Japan can be a lonely place for foreigners sometimes, and so with that, like people who are again, like-minded folks, like yourself, Ziv, for example. That's kind of the intention. That would be the ideal place if I can meet more people like yourself, for example, like you and I think Terry, right?
Hey, Lloyd, yeah.
There's Tyson Bettino, right?
Yeah.
So people like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. So obviously with the name dropping, you already know quite a few people there. So hopefully we can help expand your circle, and we'll be very excited to see what you're up to, let's say 6 months down the track.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll have you back here. Well, thanks for your time, man. Looking forward to it. So when exactly are you arriving?
So that's the tricky part. So I want to get there in the 3rd or 4th week of November.
Right.
But I haven't set a date yet because it kind of depends on the rental situation, and that's kind of also something I want to discuss if possible, right? In terms of like, I could just, for example, talk to a company, and a lot of these share house companies, they only want to text with you. They don't want to talk to you. As long as you're abroad.
With somebody who can help you with that. So Mika Gimen from Add Value in Tokyo, her company does real estate generally, all sorts of things, but she specifically, number one, speaks very fluent English and is always happy to chat, and number two, she handles share houses. But I think their minimum is 3 months, which sounds like not a problem for you, right?
Yeah. 3 months is a good start, actually. Yeah.
All right. So we'll put you in touch. See, there's your first connection right there.
Thank you. Yeah. And in terms of insurance, right? I'm told that once you get to Japan, you have to buy certain insurance, not just before you move there, but also once you get there.
Sorry, you're talking about medical insurance?
Medical insurance and apparently some other insurance as well. Or like, how does that work?
Not that I'm aware of. So medical insurance will be part of what you get as a resident. So any medical expenses, you're only paying 30% of generally. And then,
as a resident, that's just default?
That's just any resident gets that, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
I'm aware. I'm no immigration lawyer, but as far as I'm aware. And then if you're renting a place, then you need to get content and tenant insurance. But I don't think that's a thing in a share house.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
But again, I'm no expert on visas, so I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that's how it works for everyone. Yeah.
Sure, sounds good. And in terms of the transportation, right, in Tokyo, right?
Yep.
Of course, these are like small questions that I could probably Google as well. But since you're talking, why not, right? Yeah. So there's buses, there's trains, and then there's bicycles, right?
Subway.
And sorry.
And subway.
Yeah. So trains and subway are different.
Yes, trains in Tokyo specifically. The JR train network is usually the overground train line, and the subway network runs underneath. I think there may be a few stations where they sort of one turns into the other, like they do in Fukuoka. But I haven't actually driven. I haven't actually transported through one of those, so I'm not sure. Some of the stations will have both. Some of the stations will have the other network within a few blocks away, and some of them are just not connecting at all. So particular areas you'll have to get to either with one or the other.
Yep. So in terms of that, so when I'm looking for a place to rent, like a place to stay, right? Now, my first thought was, let's just find a place that's as close as possible to the place I'm going to be working in, which is the incubator, right? And the judo school, which is where I want to train judo. And But then I was like, well, if I move away, of course, because that's near the Tokyo Dome, right, which is in the kind of like Ueno
Yep.
region, right? And that's naturally more expensive, right? So in terms of the trade-off between distance and how much rents actually go down versus how much you'll be spending on transportation if you take the train every day, to and fro, I was kind of like wondering if you had any.
Not even close. Trains are cheap. So if you can survive with the longer commute, I would definitely go for the cheaper places. But again, you're talking about share houses. I'm not sure what kinds of people are in different share houses and how much you'll have that, Japanese / foreign international immersion that you're looking for if you go to suburban. But
Okay.
it's difficult. If you're working with someone like Mika again, then she'll tell you, who are the residents in that particular share house, and what kind of people tend to go there or not. But if you're gonna be just going, texting and emailing with people, then they're probably not going to share that information. So either work with a company, if you can, work with a company that can just be a bit more open and let you know what the different share houses look like. Otherwise, maybe Airbnb it for the first month and go visit a few of these places so you get a feel for them.
Makes sense. Fair enough. Sounds
But
good.
definitely, the difference in rent, even with a share house, would be a lot higher than the difference than the extra you pay for transportation. I wouldn't even consider that.
Makes sense. So trains are cheap, essentially. Like, it shouldn't be like if I can do a longer commute, like 15-20 minutes by train, and get a huge the rent discount will be so much bigger than what I would be spending every day for a month.
From my experience, share houses tend to cost the same as a small rental apartment. The difference being that you don't have to make, any obligations beyond a few months and provide the sort of credentials that they're asking for. So again, if we're talking Tokyo, let's say you might be paying, I don't know, $800 a month, $1,000 a month, whatever the case may be.
Okay. In terms of yen, what I've been looking for, like what I've found so far in terms of share houses, is in the Ueno Asakusa area and around there, it's about for 50 to 60,000 yen per month, including utilities. You can get a small private room or a semi-private room.
That's not that expensive. I don't know that it'll be a lot cheaper in other places. Have you looked at other suburbs? Are they much cheaper?
I don't think I've looked out at suburbs which are like beyond the river. But I've looked at, like, for example, the Yanesen area, like the Sendagi, Nezu area, which is kind of north to that side, right? Which is kind of the old Japan, like old Tokyo, apparently. And their rents are more or less similar. Like in terms of 55 to 60 average, they would be like 45 to 55 average. It's like only 5 to 10,000 yen difference in monthly costs. I don't know if that counts as
your daily
far or
your daily commute is probably going to be something around the vicinity of $3 to $4 a day. So that, I mean, if you're really going at it 7 days a week, that might be similar to the price difference you'll be paying. Yeah.
I see. Makes sense. Fair enough. Yeah, cool. I mean, it sounds like if I'm going at it every day, which I probably will, at least 6 days a week. It sounds like it's better to just stay close by and get a second-hand bicycle and just travel by that. Right?
Up to 50,000-60,000 yen a month, I'd say definitely, yeah, because you'll not just the people in the share house, just the convenience and the stuff surrounding you would be a lot nicer.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm sorry, I'm on the free version of Zoom. I can disconnect, take 10 minutes until they let me back in, and then kick that off again if you got more questions.
I guess we can take it offline to understand more about the new business that you started, right, for moving to Japan, and let's join back in, and then maybe end the recorded call here?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll end the recording now, and I'll hit you up on WhatsApp. I think our listeners have been hearing enough about our business, so let's take that off.
Sounds good. All right.
All right. Good talking to you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you soon.
So there you have it. Impressive young man, isn't he? I think we'll be hearing far more about him and his career in the future. I know we'd definitely love to have him over for an update in a few months' time, so watch this space. Now, if you found value in this podcast, we'd really love it if you could like, subscribe, and even better, share the episode with anyone in your network who might also find value in it. And of course, leave us a review or a comment wherever you might have found this podcast. Your word of mouth is our oxygen, and it helps us reach more and more and more people who might find value in the topics that we cover here. We love hearing from you. And of course, if you want to be on the podcast, either as a sponsor, we can definitely put you in the ears of anyone interested in moving to Japan, or even better, as a guest, either via recorded conversation or just send in your questions, audio, video, written form. We'll try to give you the answers you're looking for. Just drop us a line here in the comment section or via DM or on email, info@nipponbridge.com. That's INFO, info@NIPPON, nipponbridge.com. All one word. We want to know what you think. Hope to have you with us again next time. And until then, have a great day or night ahead. Yoroshiku.